based on our tracking for 2026 already, they're way out ahead of everyone else. I think they're somewhere in the neighborhood of like 75 posts in the first 3 weeks of 2026, and the next most active ransomware group, I think, was maybe half of that.
It's not going to be technology that saves you. It's going to be people.
Welcome to the Talos Threat Perspective. I'm Hazel Burton. Now, every quarter we look at the Cisco Talos Incident Response data and try and make sense of any major changes or shifts in attacker behavior. In Q4 2025, which runs from September to December, one of the biggest things that jumps out straight away is the fact that overall, ransomware incidents were down. Now, ransomware played a part in about 50% of our incidents earlier on in the year. It dropped to 20% last quarter, and this quarter, they're at 13%. Now, call me glass half empty, but whilst that seems like good news, it raises a couple of questions that are worth sitting with, and that is exactly what myself and my colleagues Joe Marshall and Craig Jackson are going to do on this episode. What's also interesting about this report is that it talks about the sheer speed at which threat actors took advantage of new vulnerabilities like React to Shell. Within 48 hours of it being discovered, it was already being exploited on a mass level. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about multi-stage phishing campaigns that only needed one internal account compromise to start a bit of a chain reaction. And finally, we'll discuss the part that tends to matter the most when things are already going badly: the actual response. So we'll talk about where organizations lose the most amount of time and how they can get to root cause analysis as quickly as possible. So let's get into it. We're going to start by addressing the fact that overall the number of ransomware incidents is down this quarter. Now, I don't think anyone is expecting me to sit here and say, well, obviously that means that ransomware is on its way out. There's a couple of nuances here.
Let's say a company is hit with ransomware. And something we might see the ransomware threat actor do is say, hey, if you pay me now, I won't put any of your data or anything. I won't announce you on our shaming site. And that is a lucrative arm twist to a company that does not want their brand being advertised as a victim of a ransomware attack.
And there's also the question of timing and incentives for ransomware actors.
What I've often noticed over the years is that things are cyclical. So, and that there is a macro and a micro threat actor economy that exists. For instance, major holidays, Chinese New Year or Eastern Orthodox Christmas, or things like that can see, shockingly, a dip in certain cybercrime-based activity. Or it could also be from a macro perspective, maybe just the price of the dollar versus the ruble versus Bitcoin is not great, or who knows? Like there's so many small things that can poke into how lucrative cybercrime is or is not.
But there is one ransomware group that stuck around this quarter and was involved in a number of incidents: Chilin. Now, this is a group that has hugely taken advantage of a lot of changes in the ransomware landscape earlier in 2025, when groups like Lockbit, Ransom Hub, and Blackbuster largely fell by the wayside.
For the first 5 months of 2025, their data leak site posts had the same number of posts combined in aggregate as October 2025 alone. Based on our tracking for 2026 already, they're way out ahead of everyone else. I think they're somewhere in the neighborhood of like 75 posts in the first 3 weeks of 2026, and the next most active ransomware group, I think, was maybe half of that.
Let's move on and talk about the ways that attackers are getting into organizations, because that stayed pretty consistent from the last quarter. The exploitation of public-facing applications was again the number one initial access vector. We still saw some tool shell activity hanging around, but then we had the big one in December with React to Shell. Now, public reporting on React to Shell has revealed that it has been used by state sponsor groups, ransomware affiliates, and more, which highlights the diverse array of threat actors who look to leverage new exploits. Basically, if it's out there, everyone wants it. and they're going to use it fast. Because what really stands out here is the speed at which threat actors capitalize on new vulnerabilities and the inherent risk that comes with internet facing enterprise applications and default deployments in widely used frameworks. This is usually the point where conversations turn to why don't organizations just patch? And on paper, it sounds obvious, but in practice, it can be anything but. But unfortunately, that race to patch window is getting smaller and smaller for defenders.
Probably the unsexiest part of information security is your asset inventory management. I work in operational technology and ICS, where yes, we patch. We have to because of these critical infrastructure systems, but it has to be done in a very methodical and set pace because of the nature of what that business imperative is, depending on what you're doing. We always like to think, well, obviously you patch as fast as possible. Some businesses have said if we do this and it destabilizes something, we could lose more money than we would actually lose in a ransomware attack, which sounds wild to say, but like it's the truth. Like that is the risk calculus that goes into like these decisions of well, what do we do about this bad thing and how do we respond to this bad thing? A thoughtful risk management approach would be if it's a CVSS score of a 10, gosh, we got to hit the gas pedal. We got to do this because we know the adversaries are doing that.
By the way, React to Shell was a 10.0. All right, let's talk phishing. So, after exploiting public facing web applications, phishing was the second most common ways that attackers got initial access this quarter. Some of the cases that we responded to followed a pattern that we've been seeing more and more, and it's a really annoying pattern. It's one where threat actors just don't give up. In the report, we talk about two phishing campaigns that targeted Native American tribal organizations, both of which saw multiple levels of persistence. And when one tactic didn't work, they kept going until they found an account to compromise. After which, the attackers conducted further internal phishing attacks or launched a web shell and a third party domain. Now, a couple of things suggested that these two incidents likely came from the same campaign. Why is that?
Right now, we have the SLCGP, the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program, which is set to expire on January 30th of 2026. And I'm not going to get into like all the politics surrounding that, but the general idea is a significant funding mechanism for protecting these organizations through cybersecurity mechanisms is about to expire. And I know that there are efforts underway to renew that and provide another, I think it's something along the lines of $1 billion in funding for that. But threat actors read the news. So if we get to January 30th, 2026, and this lapses, it's kind of telegraphing that maybe there's not going to be as much budget and resources available for organizations like this to protect themselves.
The other thing to note is that attackers may have had more time to spend on persistence and multiple campaign stages because somebody else did the first part for them.
Phishing as a service, like Typhoon or sorry, not Typhoon, Tycoon. There's some really great phishing kits and phishing as a service, like ransomware as a service operators out there. They'll give you a burnable infrastructure. You'll use routers in Brazil that have been compromised. They can act as email relays or gateways. Like there's some really cool stuff out there for, hey, I want to just phish people. Someone will sell you that service. And then all you need to do is just find your targets and start shotgunning out emails. Even when you probably can shut that adversary out, they probably have harvested enough information to continue the campaign and go, well, these following individuals opened this link and responded to this, and that's enough harvesting for us to continue the phishing campaign.
I want to spend the last few minutes talking about what it's actually like when an incident is happening, what tends to slow it down, and what tends to speed things up.
One of the objectives, if not the top objective that we always hear, is get me to RCA as quickly as possible. And in that case, in that context, we RCA is root cause analysis. They want to know what happened, how the adversary got in, what they did. I like to say to achieve RCA quickly and efficiently, you have to have RCA with your logs. And in that context, what I'm talking about is retention, correlation, and access. Making sure that we can get access quickly, because there's nothing worse. We'd love to spend the first 4 hours of our time with you actually investigating, crunching the logs, crunching your, disk images and doing that investigation, instead of trying to set up access to 7 different security controls and phoning to a vendor to see if they can set us up access. We're losing a lot of time there.
You play like you practice, right? So if you're not running like steady tabletop exercises, if you're not preparing for a moment that will be awful, then you are going to flounder. I don't think I've ever seen it really go off without a hitch. But if you train for it, you're prepared for those bumps and you can adapt and adjust, which is why it's so good to hire good people and then train them and keep them fueled and keep them up to snuff, and also to invest in these tabletop exercises to prepare for that, because that is going to be your biggest. It's not going to be technology that saves you. It's going to be people.
Looking at this quarter's report, nothing points to the fact that this work is getting easier. But there is one big thing in the pro column for defenders, and that is the fact that this is not a new set of problems. The same fundamentals of incident response still apply. Fewer ransomware incidents doesn't change that, and neither does the new vulnerability of the month. Thank you for watching this episode of the TTP. If you want the full report, you can just click the link in the description. You can also subscribe to the Talos YouTube channel to get notified when new episodes drops. Thanks for watching and take care.